really have to have a good handle on who you are. What are your strengths? What are your weaknesses? What is your work style? What's your confidence level? Your business really needs to align with who you are.
I'm the visionary, not the integrator. Both are needed very much in order to grow a business. And for most of my adult career life, I spent time trying to become what I thought I needed to be in order to run a business instead of just leaning into my God-given strengths, what I call my circle of genius. And one of the things that I remember they talked about in there was who makes the best hamburger? And they gave everybody to the count of 10 to think about it. And then they came back and said, how many of you said McDonald's? And of course, nobody said McDonald's. They don't make the best hamburger. But he goes, who makes the most money selling hamburgers? And that was McDonald's. And he went on to explain that the reason is because they have a very straightforward, simple process that is repeatable. So no matter what McDonald's you go to, sorry, McDonald's, you get the same average at best burger. But you know what? It's predictable, and people like predictable, and it's also profitable because of the way that they do it. Hi, and welcome to this episode of Business Alchemy. I'm your co-host, Jonathan, with my co-host, Beth, as we chat with you today about different business things that we've learned over the years and hopefully share some insights that add some value to you as well. Today, I'm really excited, Beth. So not everybody knows, but we've been leading a Thrive Mastermind for the last almost 90 days. It's just wrapping up a 90-day process. And I got to tell you, I've really enjoyed the opportunity. I mean, we've got over 100 people to chat with and to talk. And what's been so fun is not only just the experience, but actually getting some of the feedback from some of the people in the mastermind as they're seeing an impacting change. In fact, I didn't even told you, just this morning, I got a message from one of our Thrive members talking about how impactful it's been on their business. And the main thing that's impacted has been right up here. It's changing that mindset. It's changing. And it's the comment they made, it would just warm my heart. It was, I didn't realize I needed to be a leader in my business. And you may hear that and go, well, duh, of course you got to be a leader. But it's true. I mean, we spent a lot of time in business, and I didn't necessarily always understand what it meant, certainly, to be that leader. And today, I think we'd like to share 9 tips that we think are really important. Before I kind of walk through step by step what those 9 tips are, kind of those 9 principles, anything you want to add before I dive into that?
Absolutely. I think that these are all from our experience having a marketing agency, and they all really proved out. I think that the best thing we can do for others is to really talk about these, because even if you're well established in your business, if you're doing well in your business, you're struggling in your business, if you're just starting a business, going back to the basics and talking about some of these fundamentals, I think can be vastly important to the success of your business. And I too have had some comments about how great this has been and how, oh, well, I didn't know this would apply to me, but wow, has it ever? So I'm excited to share these.
Yeah, I think it's important. And one of the things that I've certainly learned over the years is that it's not all about what I know. Sometimes it's about getting input and feedback from other, and really that iron sharpens iron. You know, that sometimes that's some of the most important things we can learn. So, well, let's start. I'm going to go and give a list. So if you're listening, I'm going to tell you what all 9 are. And then Beth and I are going to spend a few minutes talking about each one and kind of how it's impacted us. So first, principle number 1, know thyself. So important. Understand your strengths, understand your values, your vision. And then clarity creates confidence. Boy, I know this has been a big one for me, and being ADD and not always having, well, I won't talk about it now. We'll talk about it in a moment. But really fighting that imposter syndrome. One of my favorites is serving the right people and understanding who your ideal client is. Boy, it's so critical for thriving. One that you definitely taught me, process over panic, structure and SOPs. One that I've maybe had to become brought along kicking and screaming on occasion, but boy, life is better with it. This is, I think, one that you actually coined the phrase, simplify to amplify. And I love that, because I do think in so many areas of our life and our business, we overcomplicate things. Your customers are your compass. And I love this one because I grew up always thinking your customers are always right. And I think it's much more accurate to say your customers are your compass. And then grow with intention for number 8. And number 9, one of my favorites, of course, is AI is your ally, and not
Mm-hmm.
something that you need to be worried about. So let's go ahead. Did I miss one? Did I miss consistency builds credibility, or did I mention that one?
You
I think I
did.
might have missed that one.
But we'll cover it when we go back.
Yeah, so it's what I get for looking at a list and not keeping track as I go down. So anyway, those are all 9 of them. Let's start. We'll start right at the top of the list. Know thyself. So Beth, when
Mm-hmm.
we talk about know thyself, other than it sounds like King James Bible to me, what in the world does that mean to the business owner?
Well, I think before we start with a business, you really have to have a good handle on who you are. What are your strengths? What are your weaknesses? What is your work style? What's your confidence level? Your business really needs to align with who you are. And the great
Yeah.
thing is there's some great books out there. There's some great tests out there that you can take in order to figure this out. And one of the first ones I recommend everybody take is 16 Personalities. It's essentially a Kersey-Bates test. Meyer-Briggs is another word for it. But 16personalities.com actually has a free test, and I love it because it gives you an overall idea of who you are, your personality, how you
Yeah.
think. And I think that's so critical. And the other one I strongly recommend is a DISC test, DISC. And that's
Mm.
dominant, influence, stability, and conscientiousness. And it shows where you are on this graph. And it's basically your work modus operandi. So it's really important to know these things. But even more, I think, is determining whether you are really a visionary or if you're an implementer or integrator.
Mhm.
I think that's another one as well. And of course, we know you're just naturally that visionary, where I'm more of an implementer, integrator, and those have balanced out really well with each other.
No, I think you're spot on those. I think the know thyself to me has been so relevant, and like you said, I'm the visionary, not the integrator. Both are needed very much in order to grow a business. And for most of my career, my adult career life, I spent time trying to become what I thought I needed to be in order to run a business, instead of just leaning into my God-given strengths, what I call my circle of genius. And I know it has made an incredible difference, not only in business, but in our lives as well, when I finally stopped trying to become something that I thought the world needed me to be, and instead said, this is who I am, and lean into that. So, yeah, I think the know thyself is so incredibly important. And like you
Well,
said,
and
it's really even comes before the business. We need to know that before you do the business, because if your business doesn't align with who you are, the business is at best going to be arduous.
Well, and it can really impact who you hire too. Because I
Yeah.
remember when we first started, one of the things that you wanted to do was to hire people who did what you do. And that
Yes.
was really a mistake. We needed to hire people who didn't do what you did well. Keep you in your lane, have you do the sales and marketing. And then before I actually came on, would hire an implementer for you, someone to handle some of the
Correct.
administrative, which was not your strength. So walking in and knowing what your strength was really critically important. And if you have a business now and you don't know where you fall, I highly recommend you figure that out first.
Yeah, really, really good. Well, that kind of brings us right into the second point, which is clarity creates confidence. And I
Hmm.
certainly have found that understanding who I am made a tremendous difference in the amount of confidence I had, because I didn't feel like I was impersonating somebody else or trying to be somebody I wasn't. Can you talk to me from your perspective about that clarity create confidence, and also how that relates to something that I know almost all of us as entrepreneurs deal with, and that's imposter syndrome?
Definitely. I think that if we're not confident, we're obviously unsure. And if we're unsure of our strengths, if we're unsure of who we are, of what we can do, what we're selling in our business, if we're unsure of those things, then that really comes across in our pitch to our potential sales, our potential customers, and also to any team that we may have. It's hard to be a good leader if you're fighting against who you think you may or may not be. So it's really important to be clear on things like your goals, your audience, your your offerings. It's really going to lead to purpose and decisiveness. And that's so, so important as a leader, to be a decisive leader. Doesn't mean that you can't go back and go, oh, I think that I was wrong about that. We're going to do something else instead. It just means when you make a decision, you do it with confidence. And most of the time, that is the path forward. I know that to be clear on your goals, that's really important. I use a system called EOS, Entrepreneurial Operating System, and it actually walks you through things like your vision, your mission, your your values for the company. And those are all important so that you know them, but also that your team knows them. So you're all on board, you all have the same vision, and you can move forward together. It just brings clarity and it brings confidence.
No question about it. I can't agree more. And I know, just speaking again personally, how impactful that has been on me. You've seen that, and just in, when we're kind of out over the end of our skis, so to speak, and leaning a little too far forward, or sometimes just on the wrong path, it's really difficult to have that confidence. So you're laughing because you know that I kind of live out over the edge of my skis. That's kind of where I'm
I
comfortable.
just
So
thought it was a really funny visual, so it popped in my head, and I'm like, that's pretty funny.
I love it. Well, let's talk about point number 3, which is serving the right people. Who
hmm
is your ideal client? I know this one to me has been one, thankfully, I learned earlier on, but I still struggle with. And that is that so often as business owners, we feel that anybody that can fog a mirror that's willing to pay us money is a good customer, when in reality, that's not the case. And in most cases, that right customer, there are specific characteristics that allow that prospect, that person, to be a good customer of ours. And a good customer doesn't just mean they're good, that what we do is good for them. It also means that they're good for us to deal with, because sometimes,
hmm
even though you may have a great product, a great service, sometimes the people that you're dealing with are not always ready to receive that, and it's not always the right thing for you either as a business owner. Can you dive into that a little bit? Because you've really helped me understand a lot about that over the years, Beth, about serving the right people and really understanding who the right clients are.
Well, we had to get some help with this one. We actually brought somebody in, a consultant, to go through a process with us where we analyzed our clients. They asked a bunch of great questions about what kind of that sweet spot was for us and what the ideal client was. And we were able to really narrow it down then and pinpoint the type of potential client that we should be looking for. And that was just critical, because if they're easy to work with, they are agreeable, they want our services, they have a pain point that we're able to solve for them, those are all key. But then we even took it one step further, and on an annual basis, this might sound awful, but we did this, we actually would go through and rank all of our clients. Who were our A clients? Who were our B clients? Who were our C clients? Who were our D clients? And those that were D clients, we actually would either go fire, or we would just kind of wind down their projects and they would go bye-bye. And that was a good thing, because you really want those A and B clients. And those are clients who, one, pay their bills on time. That's really critical. Two, for us, they needed to be somewhat tech savvy. If they were completely clueless about any kind of technology, it tended to cause more conversation than what was really necessary. We're big into over communicating, but if they're kind of clueless on the technical side, that was just painful. Two, were they pleasant to work with? Were they
Mm.
grumpy? Were they nice people? Another one was whether they gave us referrals. That was huge too. So, and if they didn't do all of those things, that was okay. They didn't have to do all those things. But the more of them that they did, it elevated them farther on the scale. And that was a good thing for us. So, really serving the right people, knowing who your ideal client is, and then looking at your client list on a regular basis, that was critical for us.
No, and again, I remember going through the ABCD part, and I was the one that generally got to reach out to the D clients. And what was always interesting to me in that process is that generally, as we had those D clients, it wasn't a surprise, and it was actually a relief in many cases to go, "Whew, that's that one." When the phone rang and it was them on the call, you were like, "Oh no." Or when it popped up in your email and you saw who it was from, you're like, oh no. Those are not the clients that you want to have. Now, we all have that on occasion, but if that's a regular occurrence with your clients, and maybe a good question to ask yourself, even as you're listening, what's that one client? We all have one that when they email us, we go, oh, great. That's probably a client you need to think about trying to transition away from. And as you mentioned, sometimes it's not just saying sorry, we're done, but it's helping them move to somebody better suited to take care of them,
Yeah.
and killing them with kindness on the way out, so to speak. But yeah, we all have those, and it's good business to understand who that is and to work through that.
If
The
you
next
can
thing we
boot them in
talked,
the butt
go ahead.
and out the door, if you can boot them in the butt and out the door and have them thank you for it, you know you did it well. And they're
Yeah,
going to remember that you were really looking out for their best interest too. And if you're just not a good fit, you're just not a good fit.
exactly. Yeah, absolutely. Absolutely. Well, I think, and that leads us into the next one, which is process over panic. And this one's definitely one you had to teach me. I remember learning very early on, and I'll never forget. In fact, I think it was as before we even started Valor Circle. We didn't have any money, and I had decided to buy a coaching program because I love to buy training programs. And one of the things that I remember they talked about in there was who makes the best hamburger. And they gave everybody to the count of 10 to think about it. And then they came back and said, how many of you said McDonald's? And of course, nobody said McDonald's. They don't make the best hamburger. But he goes, who makes the most money selling hamburgers? And that was McDonald's. And he went on to explain that the reason is because they have a very straightforward, simple process that is repeatable. So no matter what McDonald's you go to, sorry, McDonald's, you get the same average at best burger. But you know what? It's predictable, and people like predictable, and it's also profitable because of the way that they do it. And that really resonated with me. And you've done such a great job since then. That was probably close to 15, 20 years ago that I did that, of helping me understand how SOPs and processes help avoid panic. Can you share a little bit more about that?
Well, actually, I think I was annoyed because I had been telling you things like that for quite some time, and
Yes,
it took
probably
a
true.
seminar that you had to go through that said, "Oh yeah, repeatable processes are the way to efficiency and more profit." And I'm like, "Duh, I've been telling you that." But sometimes someone else other than a wife has to tell you that, and that's fair. So obviously, I am very focused on operations and really operational excellence and simplifying that and making it as structured without suffocation, because that's important too. You can't suffocate people by having these arduous lists and steps to go through, but really a structure that people can follow, because you want those repeatable processes, because then that brings efficiencies, it saves money, and saving money can be as important as making money when you're in a tight situation with your business. So that was really helpful. And we did that through a lot of SOPs. So we really had to have these, structured, processes that were written down, that was documented. And it also meant that when we were training other people, we could actually hand that to them and they would know exactly how we do it, and then they would be able to do that same process as well. And then you're just ensuring that you have happier clients, your workers are happier. It just works really well. But the key there, it definitely is not to have that be so rigid that it suffocates. You can't do that either as well. But structure does allow you to really scale, delegate, and breathe.
Yeah, so true. And it removes the panic part. I remember though, knowing there was a
Yes.
process in place, really,
Yes.
it removed so much drama from the process. And I remember that was really critical.
And I loved
So,
the money savings. That was so important. I loved saving money. So when we
oh
could
yeah.
do that, that was huge.
Well, I mean, it's not one of the principles, but let's face it, for every dollar you save in your business, you've just made an extra dollar tax free, because we don't have to, at
Hmm.
least as of this recording, we're not paying money in taxes on the money we save. We're paying taxes on the money we earn. And so if you can spend less and figure out ways to lower your cost, every dollar that you lower is like a dollar that you just made tax free.
It's so
So
true. And that was always critical to me. It still is personally and professionally. I enjoy that. And through tight times in your business, you'll be happy. But it also leads to just a higher profit margin. If you have less expenses, if you're shored up with your processes, that can, everything costs less and processes move faster. So it's just more efficient.
excellent, excellent. So this next one is yours. I think actually we need to put a little trademark Beth on this one because I think this is your phrase, but is simplify to amplify. Talk to us about that one, Beth. What does that mean?
Yeah, actually, mine was simplify and automate, and that was that was key, and that was something I said a lot to my team because it really helped again with the profit margin, and it made their lives easier. So efficiency isn't just about doing more; it's doing less better, work smarter, not harder, all of those great sayings that we've heard our whole life. This is really that. So, to go through and really eliminate things that are dragging your business down, improving things, it's just huge and ties into what I was just saying over about structure and SOPs and simplification just makes life better. You don't have quite so much weight on your shoulders. You don't have as many things that you're having to, oversee, and it makes life sweeter. I sleep better when things are simplified. So, yes, if you really want to amplify what you're doing, simplify, automate. We're going to talk about automation shortly here.
Yep.
Those are huge, huge things to having a really well run, successful business.
So true. And as who I just am, I have a tendency to overcomplicate things. And I know one of the things you've always added value is waiting till I'm done with all of the 400 steps that I think we should do or the extra things and then going, okay, who's going to manage all of that? And then I'm like, not me. And then you're like, well, if you're not managing it, then we're going to simplify it. And that has
Yeah.
served us so well over the years.
And actually, you've gotten just tons better about that. I don't know if it was an age thing that came with the white
Probably.
beard or what, but yeah, you've definitely been like, I'm not doing that much, or I don't want to think about that much. So we could really focus in on some of our services then too, simplifying, and that was huge. And we used our customers really to do that, to figure out what services were going to be the best ones for us to provide. And I think that's our next point.
It is. We are now going to talk about your customers are your compass. How important it is to listen to their needs and their feedback, and that retention and referrals are so valuable. And we've certainly learned that keeping a client and getting referrals from a client is so valuable because it costs less and is easier than trying to go find a brand new customer. So when we can keep that customer with us, or if we can get even better, get referrals from that customer, those tend to be great ways to grow the business. How would you expand on that from that? Because of course there are times that we really get frustrated with our customers and think, business would just be great if it weren't for the customers. How do you make that transition? And I won't ever say who I've heard that from, but how do you make that transition to your customers or your compass and changing that mindset?
Well, there's no doubt you always had a great way with our customers. And I really preferred to work internally with our team. There's no doubt about that whatsoever. But we would definitely take their feedback and their questions and their complaints really to heart and figure out what we could do better or differently. And so our services actually really changed or kind of flexed and molded with what the clients really needed. And that was huge, especially with, changes in marketing, because we had a marketing agency over the years over almost 15 years from start to finish. There was very little actually that stayed the same in that period of time. And our clients' needs were just huge in determining what the next service was going to be. And of course, the referrals was big, and we actually used, as I mentioned earlier, as part of the client ranking that we did. So having those clients on that would give us referrals, we just knew that they were a good fit for us, we were a good fit for them, and we used them as our compass.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think, we talked in another episode about the value of those referrals in growing business and how effective that was when we were growing the agency to be able to get those referrals from people. I think so often we get busy and we don't necessarily think to ask our clients for those referrals. And I think it's an important reminder that, when your clients are happy, or even when they're not, asking them for referrals is a great way to get that, and then also to get feedback from them. I remember we used to say, if you're happy, we'd love to get a referral, and if you're not comfortable, would you please reach out and let us know what we can do to earn that right to be able to get that referral. And it was great because I think I actually learned this, of all places, at a Holiday Inn Express that we stayed at once, and they kept saying, at the conclusion of your stay, we're going to ask how it went. And we would, anything less than a 5, we consider to be a failure on our part. And it was in the elevator. I remember going up and down the elevator and seeing it in the elevator, not thinking much of it until we checked out. And I remember checking out at that time, and they said, how would you rate your service? And they didn't ask me for the 5-star review, but I remember seeing the sign and thinking they considered a failure if it wasn't a 5. The sign specifically said, if there's anything we can do to earn that 5-star rating, please let us know. Now, it was a Holiday Inn Express. It wasn't the Ritz-Carlton, so it wasn't like it was a stellar experience, but it was fine. And I remember thinking to myself, well, I didn't actually complain about anything. I didn't ask them to fix anything that they didn't fix. So I guess I owe them a 5-star review. And I think as business owners, we can remember that as a short story as to how important it is to reach out and set that expectation with our clients that we desire to earn that 5-star review from you. We want to. And if for any reason we haven't, please let us know. Because in most cases, people will go, well, it's been a good experience. I don't know if I'd say it was 5-star, but I've never complained. So yeah, I'll give you a 5-star. Or I guess I have been pretty happy. I'll give you that referral. But people need to be reminded to give referrals. It's not something that just always comes naturally.
I remember you used to say that in the sales process too. Is there anything I can do to earn your business? And I always thought that was really powerful. I don't know if that was something that you learned from sales training, or if you just kind of stumbled upon that. But I always thought that was a really good segue, into asking for the business.
Well, I don't know where I learned it, but I definitely believe that in the sales process, if you're involved in that, customers want to know that you want their business. And a lot of us as business owners, we tend to go to one extreme or the other. We don't tell customers how much we value them and want them, or we go overboard and we're like, are you ready to buy? Are you ready to buy? Are you ready to buy? Beth, can I have your money? Can I have your money? And both of those drive people away. And I found a great medium in there was to let people know that, Beth, I want your business. How can I earn that? What can I do today or this week to earn that business, depending on your sales cycles? I found it to be a very effective question to ask. And it must not have been very common because it was definitely one of those think questions. You would literally see prospects like take a moment and go, well, let me think about that. What could you do to earn my business? And the great news is more often than not, they actually gave you advice back or gave me advice back of things that told me basically this is what it's going to take to sell me. And then I could determine, was that something that we could do as a company or not? Was that a need we could meet, something we could do? And sometimes it was, and sometimes candidly it wasn't. Some people wanted to go all the way to the moon and back for $1, and it wasn't possible. But we had other clients that were very rational about it and like, well, if we could do X, then I'd be ready to move forward. And I know we could probably do a whole episode on sales, but that was a very effective way that helped us work through that process. So yeah, thanks for bringing that up. All right. So next we have got consistency builds credibility. Talking about whether it's your brand voice, your client processes, how you deliver, and it kind of relates back to process over panic, but that consistency really builds trust on both sides. And I learned this, it made sense to me that this added trust, hiccups, with the client What I didn't realize is that it actually built confidence with the team as well, our internal
Mhm.
teams. Can you kind of shed some light on that? Why? I mean, I think it's pretty obvious if you're consistent, that's good. Clients like consistency. They like to know they can depend on you. But why in the world is it valuable for the team?
Well, this goes back to having a vision, a mission, excuse me, and values, shared values, and future goals that your team knows about, that they work towards, and that they share with you. And having consistency and doing things that reinforce that through your leadership is huge. It's just your team will trust you. You'll have more rapport with them. You'll have their loyalty. One, they know they can trust you because you're not saying one thing one day and then turning a 180 the next day. That's part of it. But also, they know then that they can be part of the solution. And if your team really understands that you're a solid leader, that they can trust in this direction, this truly is the direction we're going in, it helps them do their job better. And it's just a shared voice that they can get behind. And it tends to really build morale a lot. I also want to just ask you, one of the things that we would do would be online through social media, through blog posts. You would establish us as a topical authority, that we
Yeah.
were through our brand. And I think that that was really big for consistency and building that credibility as well. Do you want to talk about that a little bit?
Yeah, I think when it comes to branding, that type of consistency is important both on two fronts. It's not just a visual consistency that your logo it follows and that you're using similar styled images and similar messages, because that repetition absolutely works. But it's also making sure that you're being consistent in the timeliness of what you do, especially when it comes to things like digital marketing, posting social media, posting videos, posting blog posts. I can't tell how many clients I've talked to over the years when we had the agency, and even clients that I've talked to now as I teach clients how to do some of that with AI. How many times they're like, well, I spent a month and I wrote 4 blog posts and nothing happened. And I'm like, okay, great. You've got 11 months to go. Then let's talk about it. Same with social media. I think every business owner out there has been in a situation where, like, maybe have a love-hate relationship with social media. It's fun. It's fun to hang out. I admit I love watching, all these short videos and that type of stuff. It's always fun to do. That makes me laugh. At the same point, most businesses, if they were honest, probably have never made a penny off social media. And they often wonder, why do we do it? And I think a lot of that is because of lack of consistency there. When you're posting periodically and you're always posting about what you're selling, not about adding value to your customer, then you don't have the right type of consistency that sits there. One of the most things I love more than anything else is when I talk to a new prospect and they make the comment, I don't know what you do, but Jonathan, I see you everywhere. That to me is just great fulfillment that I'm doing the things necessary to add value and to get their attention in a positive manner, because it's not due to ads. You know that we don't spend a lot of money on ads. So it's not due to advertising. It's due to adding value in people's lives and doing that on a consistent basis. By the way, if you're wondering, if you're listening to this, consistency, if you're a business owner on social media, doesn't mean a post a week. Not anymore, not in 2025. It means more like a post a day, or preferably 3 posts a day, every day, adding value to your clients. And this is the hard part. And this comes from a sales guy, so this is hard for me to say. But no more than 1 out of 10 posts that you make should be sales oriented or about you. The rest of it should all be about your customer, about adding value to your customer. So again, I won't go down that. I could go down that rabbit trail for a long time. We'd be here. But yeah, that consistency, it plays across the board in so many different areas. So that brings us
We'll
to
definitely
grow.
do another one. We'll do
Yeah,
another podcast about that.
we could probably do one on each one of these, actually. The next one is grow with intention. And you made a note on this one, Beth, about scaling is not just about doing more, it's about being ready, and how solid foundations and documented systems and an aligned vision lead to sustainable growth. Now, coming from the guy who likes to build the airplane as it's taking off, as I so often like to say, I think this is one that I want you to spend just a few minutes chatting about the intentionality behind it.
Well, this is really a culmination of all the other steps we just talked about. And if you're doing all of those other things to get to this point, you're growing with intention. The only thing I would add to that would be strategizing. And I remember earlier in our earlier years, you and I talked a lot in general about where we wanted to go and that type of thing. But we were so busy with the day-to-day items, we really didn't strategize out very far. And so as our business grew, we got actually better at this. And we would have a lot of strategy systems, time where we would specifically step away from the business, not have those moment-to-moment, disruptions. We'd do it, first it was just you and I, and then we had a management team, so it was us with them. And we would take time quarterly to just step away and strategize, take a look, hopefully somewhat subjectively, at what we were doing, what our services were, who our clients were, and then we would say, how are we going to move forward? You combine that with everything else that we just talked about, and you truly will be growing with intention. And I think that that is just huge if you really want to be successful. Whatever your version of success is, it's not always just money. Sometimes it's not even a lot of money. It's just having a job that provides for you on a day-to-day basis. But whatever your goals are, whatever success is for you, doing these items will help you grow with intention.
Yeah, very well said. And I think so important that we need to not just, I'll go back to our Thrive example and some of the members we've talked to, that realization that we can't just kind of show up and hope for the best. I mean, we can, but that's not going to lead to the results that the intentionality will lead to. Just before this call, I talked to a gentleman in California, and as we're recording this, it was early for him. It was about 5:30 in the morning. And I'm like, you are an early riser. He goes, I've already been up for 2 hours. And he was sharing some stuff with me. And he goes, he has a background. This is his third career, so to speak. He's bought an HVAC business. And he shared with me that, he doesn't want to be the guy getting in the trucks and doing the HVAC because that's just not his gift. That's not what he's good at. And he said, so I have to grow the business in order for it to generate the revenue that I need because I don't want to be the guy in the trucks all the time. And it was very interesting as he talked about the intentionality. He bought the business 4 years ago, and they have literally grown by 400% over the last couple of years because of that intentionality that he's took. And he shared with me the kind of the plan that he had and where he was at. And it was so cool to see that when we have intentionality and we have a goal, it's like having a destination and having a map to get there. We can go out on a drive, and I know you don't love that without a destination, but we can go out on a drive and just drive around. And that can be fun, but it really doesn't accomplish much. If we want to accomplish something, we need to have a destination and we need to have a map on how to get there. And I think that grow with intention really fits into that. So that brings us to
very satisfying.
To our ninth point, and this is one that I'm certainly a huge advocate of, but I'd love your perspective as somebody who's not necessarily seen as, having a vested interest in AI like I do. AI is your ally. I know I talk all the time about the fact that I believe, and I really do fundamentally, that AI amplifies our skill and experience, and it is absolutely an ally. It's not an easy button. It's not replacing what we do. So maybe as someone who's not quite so much of an advocate as I am, what's your perspective on AI in business, Beth?
I'm just a quieter advocate. I definitely use AI on a day-to-day basis, but no, I'm not out there, talking from the mountains about AI. I tend to do it just a little bit lower key than you. But I definitely, believe in automation, and AI can be a big part of automation. But just on a daily basis, the things that AI can do for you to save time is incredible. So I actually have a digital magazine about AI called Everyday AI Vibe Magazine, and it talks about these very things, how you as an individual can use AI on a day-to-day basis as your ally, as a research assistant, as an advisor. And we're not talking about, huge life-changing decisions. This shouldn't be your priest or your husband or your wife, but it can absolutely be someone that can help you in business to do what you're trying to do faster, and with just more success. So I really like the time savings because, of course, I like to simplify things. I like to automate things. And AI is just wonderful at that.
No, and I agree with you. I think it's one of those tools that as we start learning how to use it, we find more and more ways to do so. And as we do that, I think we find more and more opportunities to save time. One of the things I want to encourage you, if you're listening to the podcast, you saving time is a great thing and it's awesome. Don't get me wrong. But I think where so many people need to remember is that if we can help our teams embrace AI, and our teams can save money or save time, what that can mean for our businesses. Imagine, for example, that you're able to save 30 minutes a day. I mean, Beth, that's cool. We all have more to do than we do have time. So that's cool if we can save time as leadership and ownership. But even better, even with a small company, let's say we have 5 employees. It's what I've got right now. If I've got 5 employees and every one of those, because they're using AI, can save 30 minutes a day or maybe even 60 minutes a day, that means I'm essentially getting 2.5 to 5 hours of extra capacity at zero cost, essentially. I mean, okay, maybe a little bit for the AI tools, but very, very little. And what I certainly see amongst my team, and I've certainly seen with others that I've worked with, is their teams, when they're able to save that time, it reduces their stress and they enjoy what they're doing more because they're able to spend more time on the items that they feel they need to and actually kind of invest in those, as opposed to being in a situation where it's like, I've got this huge pile of paperwork, I've got to get through it today, and I'm just going to plow through it. And that means they didn't take the time. And AI really is just a tremendous tool across the board. I know I love to recommend, if you're not leveraging AI, just start by doing one thing a day with AI and doing that. And as Beth mentioned, she's got an amazing digital magazine. Check it out. She's not necessarily as loud about AI as I am, but Beth, you've got some of the best minds in AI. And when I say AI, I want to talk business AI, not necessarily designing AI, that are writing for you and sharing articles on a regular basis. Tell me a little bit about the feedback you've gotten. I know this is something you've launched only a few months back. Tell me a little bit about that and kind of what's the vision behind that from your perspective. I want to get everybody to embrace AI, but talk a little bit about your perspective and why you think it's so important for businesses to do that.
Well, I have to go back to the fact when you mentioned, if it saves you a half an hour, do one thing with AI a day. The issue is that you do one thing with AI and you're like, wow, this is so cool. I can do so much more with this. And it's more than a half an hour then. For me personally, it saves me hours a day with the type of work that I do. And it's phenomenal. But there's a lot of fear around AI because artificial intelligence isn't really what AI is. It's not I guess it's a form of artificial intelligence, but it's just a computer, that does research really, really fast. That if I ask it to write a certain type of email, it can take all the information from a pool of information regarding well-written emails, and it writes me this fantastic email. It's not sentient. It doesn't have feelings. It can't do so many of the things that humans can do, and nor will it ever be able to, in my mind, where it can't empathize. It can't look at nuances. It's not emotionally intelligence, and real intelligence will always win out over artificial intelligence. But I want to relay that so badly to people that artificial intelligence is really a poor name for it because it's not some droid that you have living with you that's, creeping me out in some horror movie. It's sort of like when we used to go to the library and we used to go to card catalogs. Do you remember the
Yeah. Oh,
drawers?
absolutely.
Through all of those papers and then would write down on another piece of paper the books that we wanted, then would walk over to the shelves and find them, would pull the books, and we had to open them up and would find the pages and the information, then write that down. Now all of that can be done by AI in seconds. There's no more card catalog. There's no more walking over to get the book. There's no more flipping through it. I mean, literally that happens in a blink of an eye. And that's a great thing. There's nothing
Yes.
wrong with that. And that's really what AI is. And that's what I try to get across in the magazine and how helpful it really is. So my goal with the magazine is completely to eliminate fear-mongering and to really help people understand truly what this tool is and how beneficial it is.
No, I love that. And it's one of the things that I so appreciate about that, because there is a lot of fear mongering. In fact, it seems like oftentimes with AI, there's two camps. There's the it's evil, and then there's the other camp, which is it's a money tree that'll make you tons of money. And look at this Learjet I'm standing in front of that I don't own. So I think there's two sides to that, and I think somewhere in the middle is
And neither of those are true.
no, they're not. No, they're not. They definitely are not whatsoever. So awesome. Well, again, those have been some 9 tips that we think are really important that you as a business owner take. I'd love to hear your feedback and know which one of those maybe resonated with you the most. So if you would, let us know down in the comments, which one of these ideas is most relevant to you and most impactful today. Over time, they'll likely all be, but my guess is one of them or two maybe hit home today, and we'd love to hear about that. So, Beth, would you like to sign us off?
Yes, thank you. We so enjoyed having you watch today and listen to us, and we hope this brings value to you. If you are interested in more of the same, please subscribe. We would love to have you follow along in our journey and benefit from the years of experience that we've had in business, both the ups and the downs.
Yes.
And we wish you the very best of days.
Thanks, everybody. Make it a great day. Bye-bye.
Bye-bye.